I just finished doing a video about a person who left a bunch of negative content and comments on my channel, but I forgot that someone else left me a question to look up or answer. This will be my failed attempt to do something positive as opposed to the successful method of dealing with someone who desperately wants attention, even though they're good object lessons. So let's do this. Magnetic fields, electric fields, your inner zonk, what is it that makes a certain plant or something else very, very important to you when thinking about it if it's not an animal? That doesn't make any sense. Okay, there's a bunch of woo peddling about how plants do things that are amazing or magical. But on the science side of it are a bunch of people who are resistant to acknowledging something about plants. It's like it's palpable. Neuron-like systems within plants. Plants, if you're not aware of it, like trees and vines and flowers and Venus flytraps and Feed Me Seymour, have fibrous material in them, just like you and I do as tendons, ligaments, and nerve bundles. It's not outrageous to say that some of them, which are single cells in most cases, can act as biological and electrical amplifiers. Now, I have to point out something that people get wrong. The little tiny gap between the neurons, that's actually where a chemical reaction happens that sends information, because each neuron reacts at this end and the reaction propagates along the interior, and it does have electrical characteristics. But it's about like electricity, the same as a battery. Batteries are not electricity. They have the ability to have the effect of electricity for the same reason that a tree isn't just fire. And that's kind of a direct comparison. Saying that plants are electric or even magnetic, I threw that in just because it's funny, belies the fact that that's not their only existence and not the important component of how they communicate. And they do. And they also do what I would call elementary processing or thinking. They use the same logical systems that are the building blocks that go from a simple gating system that I can explain quickly to being full-on electrical computers, and also how humans and animals have neurological systems that can generate thought. I'm sorry, but if you've ever held a baby squirrel that just got fed, that's looking at you like, you're my mama now, which I have, which will bust your heart and you'll be better off for it, you understand that animals do have the ability to feel, and they can do abstract thinking. You can learn about prairie dogs being able to communicate in a grammatical and abstract sense. Doesn't matter if you like the answer. I don't give a shit, and neither do they. And plants, whether anybody wants to hear about it, have, they have axion and dendrite style potentials. They communicate bidirectionally. The plants have sort of a nervous system. It's just not the one that you and I would think of with a branching system. This is more of a parallel processing thing that would be the envy of anybody trying to make a supercomputer. They're just slow. Plants are temperature and, calorically dependent, just like you and I are. They're just more so. 3 subsystems set and release the reaction in, let's say, a Venus flytrap. Now, this is how we are going to do this. A loop-like edge of elasticity on the outside edge of what is essentially called a lobe, but it's really just the leaf that's the part of the thing that we see as a mouth with the big fangs on it. I guess they just didn't want to call it a mouth and be done with it. But anyway, that creates tension that makes it to where the outer edge is a smaller diameter than it would be just a little bit in, which means it has to fold like this way on a potato chip method or this way as a potato chip. The plant actively spreads the leaves like most plants can do, because you may notice that plants can open and close flowers and leaves. Turgor, my favorite word about plants, is hydraulic pressure from them actively and inactively or passively pumping fluids from, let's say, the root system up to the leaves hundreds of feet in the air, which use an active transport system in the form of evaporation at the top while leaving nutrients at the bottom. They're water powered and active so. Cellular growth caused by simple cell division or cells expanding or lengthening and contracting. All of this can collectively form motor changes like a muscle, changing a leaf's shape faster or slower depending on the efficiency needed. I should also point out, if most of you aren't aware of it, there are some components in insects that make them act more like hydraulic systems, sort of like your heart and mind pumps, or, well, more like linear motor systems with muscles, or just ordinary animal muscles. Plants aren't supposed to be thought of that way, but they have very similar analogs for it. A little too close for me to ignore, at least neurology. A slow shift causes an opening of the leaves, powered by the same systems that normally grow a plant and or orient the leaves towards the sun. You can see them in stop-motion videos, so you already know this, up to and including bending an entire tree over many years, or sometimes just a few months. But leaves opening to a convex, bent outward state is used to pull it open, rather than it orienting them or opening them after a night of being dark and cold. The slow shift to open, powered by the systems. All these same slow systems release suddenly, in some cases seemingly destructively within this particular plant. But instead of a flower closing at the end of the day, or a leaf snapping into a neutral position in some ways some of the other plants do, this pattern causes the outside of the leaf surface to elongate its cells in one direction, contract in another on the inside, collapsing in a trapping action that is also elastically accelerated by the closing leaves, forming a cavity bent inwards to a concave state. Further cell reaction and growth, or maybe repair, you could say, causes it to force the edges of the leaves tightly together, and also the fluid involved in all of this hydraulically that is snapped through the process is then released along with enzymes into the middle of this leaf jail to form essentially a stomach. Then the plant is able to collect, well, nutrients from something it's caught rather than having to get it out of the ground. The next step of course, is for us to find out that they can talk to each other. Oh yeah, vines do that. Other plants have an ability to at least do that partially. Many plants even produce pheromones or chemically nasty things to attack each other, which end up being used mostly for communicating their state. Plants can release a chemical that causes them to inform adjacent leaves on the system rather quickly that something's nibbling on them. The other leaves then start forming extremely dangerous, potentially lethal levels of some toxin or some irritant in them so that they won't be able to be chewed on. While one leaf is lost, hundreds are saved throughout the organism. Now, aside from me hiccuping and wondering if my head's going to pop off, I shouldn't eat so fast, and maybe someone observing it, I think this was a better use of my time and yours than discussing somebody who desperately wants attention by doing a behavior that gives them attention too easily on the internet. The adaptations we're hearing about here in this plant, specifically the Venus flytrap, but there are other plants and other creatures that are kind of in the middle, speaks to the fact that things change over time. The most likely thing that the Venus flytrap started off as was one of those plants doing a reaction that caused it to defend its leaves, eventually figuring out, or engineered, or just simply evolving, which is the most likely answer, to be able to catch nutrients in its leaves. And this allows it to get away with some things that are pretty interesting. And yes, people, if you look it up, you'll find out, oh, well, that's interesting, but isn't there some woo peddling medicine about that? Yes, there is. And it doesn't work that way. And now we get to my final point about this, including the negative Nancy that decided to post today. This is a dumb plant that can adapt over millennia to being something that could evolve into something that moves around and actively hunts. And I worry about the people who comment on this channel sometimes being able to evolve back, regressively into primitive man that had better things to do than to argue bullshit points about politics. And I also am very much encouraged by Starless Mystery for providing me something useful to talk about, reminding me that there are people out there who are curious, questioning, and are idiots. Thank you for watching. Have a good day. Good luck with that.